I spent the last 12 months working as an owner-operator running my own authority. While running, I kept track of every mile I drove, every expense, and every dollar of revenue. I compiled all of this information and put it into a spreadsheet in order to show exactly what it made, and now I'm going to share that spreadsheet with you. Let's go. Welcome back to Trucking the Seven Seas. My name is Tim, and in this episode, we're going to go over my final numbers working as an owner-operator running my own authority. For those of you who are new to the channel, welcome. I started this channel in order to show exactly what truck drivers make. I started as a company driver, working for night transportation, moved on to a lease operator, working for night transportation, then an owner-operator, leased on the Landstar, and now we are an owner-operator running our own authority. I show all of the loads I take, what the revenue is, what the expenses are, and what my net cash flow is, and I compile all this information that I put into a spreadsheet that I share with you at the end of every video. So if this is a topic that interests you, follow the channel. But in this episode, we're going to go over my final numbers after running an entire year with my own authority. Now, if you're interested in what I made as a night transportation company driver, you should be able to view that video right now. And then if you are interested in what I made as a night transportation lease operator, you should again be able to view that video right about now. And finally, if you're interested in what I made as a Landstar owner operator, you can watch that video right about now, I'm guessing. But with all that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and go over my numbers after 12 months of running my own authority. So we're going to go ahead and get into the spreadsheet right now. Okay, so this is a spreadsheet I've been updating on a weekly basis. I would update it on a weekly basis and then usually post a bi-weekly video giving everyone an update. So this just shows what loads I took, what the expenses were. There's fuel expense, maintenance expense, other expenses, insurance, all that good stuff. And then it just compiles all of the numbers on a weekly basis. So there is week 1, for instance, Mecca to Kentwood. And then there's week 2 of running my own authority. There's week 3, etc., etc. So I did that for 52 weeks straight. And 12 months, however you want to look at it, an entire year. And that is what I did for an entire year. I updated the spreadsheet weekly and gave a bi-weekly video for an entire year. So one note is I am filming this on the side of the road, so I'm just on some side of the road. It's about 8 in the morning as I'm filming this, and there's a lot of people going to work right now. So if you see people kind of flying by and making a little bit of noise, there's one. I can't stop it. I can't control traffic. I am just sitting here on the side of the road filming this. So just be advised of that. People are going to be flying by, and I can't stop it. Okay, so I wanted to go over a couple of things before we get directly into the spreadsheets and then the numbers. I want to talk about how I run and basically my kind of schedule for the year is. So first off, I do live in this truck. So this truck is my house, it is my car, and it is my job. So full-time OTR guy, don't have any kids, don't have a wife, don't have a house. I don't even have a car to drive around in. So just take note of that. I do live in this truck. And also, in terms of how I run throughout the year, I tend to take January and February. I take a lot of time off. January and February, the weather is really bad across the country, so it's a good time to take off. I take care of personal errands, I renew my authority, I go visit family, I do just whatever. So January and February, a lot of time off. Then after January and February go by, I tend to run like March to basically Thanksgiving, pretty hardcore. So I don't take many days off during that time period. Just keep running. That's when the weather starts to get better. The market starts to get better, and I tend to head out to the Midwest and go run the Midwest. So go run the Midwest from about March, April to October, November, somewhere in that time frame. Then around Thanksgiving time, I'll head back to the West Coast and I will run the West Coast. And there's a couple of reasons for that. For one, the West Coast, specifically the Los Angeles area, starts to pick up because of all of the crap coming from China. The ports in LA, they tend to do really good during the holiday season, so that helps. Also, the weather is really good during that time period, so that's good. I don't have to deal with too much snow. And also, I am a West Coast man. All my family is on the West Coast, so if I run the West Coast for Thanksgiving and Christmas and all that, I'm closer to family when I go and take that time off. So that is generally how I run. January and February, I don't run very hard at all. And then March through October, I basically take very few days off. take a little time off for Thanksgiving, run hardcore during peak season, take time off for Christmas, and then move into, the January and February time cycle again. So just that's how I generally tend to run every year. And another note with the spreadsheet, it just covers cash flow. This is the cash flow as I see it. It does not cover taxes. It does not cover depreciation on the truck. It doesn't cover any of that. It's just cash flow. That's all I track here. If you want to minus out depreciation, if you want to minus out your truck payment, if you want to minus out your taxes, you can do so on an individual basis and make an estimate. And final announcement is none of the numbers you're about to see are a guarantee. I'm just showing you my numbers so you have a better idea of what the market is like and what it is like to be an owner-operator or a lease operator or a company driver or whatever. These are my numbers. Your numbers are going to vary, so please take all of these numbers with a grain of salt. None of this is a guarantee, and I am not guaranteeing you any pay in running your own authority or any of the other positions I have shown in the past. All right, so with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the numbers here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run you through a typical week when I ran my own authority. Then after I show you the typical week, I'm going to show you the final 2 weeks of running my own authority. But again, January and February, I take time off. In the final 2 weeks of this spreadsheet here, the final 2 weeks, there's like hardly any mileage on there because I was taking time off. So because of that, I'm going to show you a typical week, which I've chosen week 22 as a typical week. And then after I show you that, I'm going to go over week 51 and 52 briefly, just to show you how the last couple of weeks went. And then we're going to go over the overalls. So let's get into it. All right, so just scrolling through here, you can see all of the weeks I've done. Here's week 1. Again, I'm not going to go through every single week because that would just take way too long. There's week 2, it shows total revenue, my loads, and everything like that. Week 3, same thing. Does the same thing every single week. It's just a way to keep track of my numbers. It's basically accounting for me. Week 4, week 5, week 6, and I did that for 52 weeks straight. But for right now, we're just going to go ahead and scroll down and go to week 22. There's nothing special at all about week 22. I just looked at it and figured this was a pretty good week to show the new viewers how a typical week would look like. So that is what we are going to cover right now. So if you have been watching this channel for a while, you don't need to watch this. It should be pretty obvious at this point how the spreadsheet works. But for the new viewers, I'm just going to go over week 22, give a snapshot of how a normal week would look like, then go over week 51 and 52 briefly, then go over the overalls. So if you've been watching this channel for a while, you don't need to watch this, you can skip this, but for right now, let's go over week 22 as an example. All right, so in week 22, I did 2 loads. In those 2 loads, I got 3,285 miles, paid a total of $5,750 at $1.75 per mile. Fuel expense, fueled up 3 times, and we also paid our IFTA bill for a total of $1,378 at 42 cents per mile. Maintenance expenses, we did replace some tires for $1,091 at 33 cents per mile. Other expenses, tolls $170, scales $29, permits $350 for a total of $550 at 17 cents per mile. Fixed costs, OmniTrack's payment came in for $8. DAT and truck stop payment came in for $149 and $42 for a total of $199 at 6 cents per mile. Totals for week 22, total expenses were $3,219 at 98 cents per mile. Total revenue was $5,750 at $1.75 per mile. That brought our net settlement to $2,500 at 77 cents per mile. Okay, yeah, so that was week 22. Somewhat typical. 2 loads, 3,000 miles, $5,700 of revenue, $1.75 cents per mile. So the mileage was high and the revenue was somewhat high because this load up here, I did a very long load. So that kind of skews things a little bit to the higher, but the rate per mile was a little lower as a result because I took that long load. So there's that, 3,000 miles, $5,700, $1.75 per mile. Somewhat typical in many ways. And then fuel expense, yeah, I had some fuel expense, and I also had my IFTA bill came in, so that brought me about 42 cents per mile. 42 cents per mile, very normal. Maintenance expenses, there was also a maintenance expense, so I threw some tires on either my trailer or my truck. I don't remember which one it was. That cost me 33 cents per mile. That's actually fairly high, but that's okay. Just an example of a typical week. And then other expenses, one note, my truck is paid off. I do not have a truck payment, so there's that. I did run into some tolls, $170, there's that. Scales, permit, I did have to renew my LLC in Nevada. So that cost me $350. There's that. So $550 total for other expenses in week 22, 17 cents per mile. Very typical. Then looking down, fixed costs, I had my load board subscriptions came in. I have a DAT and truck stop load board subscription come in, so that cost me. And then I have a professional email for $8, and that also cost me $8 for about $200 per mile at 6 cents per mile. Pretty normal. And then going down to the overalls for week 22, $3,000 of expenses, $5,000 of revenue. Both those are a little bit high, but that in the end netted me $2,500 or 77 cents per mile. And that was, I would categorize as a fairly typical week. So that was just an example of what I would do every week, 52 weeks straight, the entire year. So there's that. So that's week 22. Now I'm going to go ahead and scroll all the way down, and I'm going to go over the final 2 weeks running my own authority. And again, these final 2 weeks were not normal in any way. I was taking a bunch of time off, as I do in January and February, which is why I decided to go ahead and show week 22 to show what a typical week would look like. But for right now, let's go ahead and move on to the final 2 weeks of running my own authority. For week 51, we took 2 loads. In those 2 loads, we got 463 miles. Paid a total of $879 at $1.90 per mile. Fuel expense, we did not fuel up this week, and there were no maintenance expenses. Other expenses, there were none. And then fixed costs, there also were none. All right, totals for week 51. Total expenses were none. Revenue was $879 at $1.90 per mile for a total of $879 at $1.90 per mile. Okay, yeah, so briefly looking at 51, you can kind of see why I didn't want to go over this week as a typical week. It probably starts to make sense. I took 2 loads at 463 miles, and this is actually the first time I ever ran a week since starting my own authority, and I think when I was at Landstar as well, and night transportation, where I literally did not have a single expense. This is obviously not normal in any way, just the stars aligned on this week to the point where I actually did not have any expenses whatsoever, which is obviously not normal, and that's why I did not want to show this as a typical week. So that's why I did week 22, because this is, I believe this is the first time since I started this channel where I did not have any expenses at all. So that is why I didn't want to show week 51 and 52. So there's week 51, not normal in any way. I took a bunch of time off. And now we're going to do week 52, which is not much different. So let's go ahead and move on to week 52, though. For week 52, we did 3 loads. In those 3 loads, we got 753 miles. Paid a total of $1,928 at $2.56 per mile. Fuel expense, we fueled up 2 times for a total of $608 at 81 cents per mile, and there were no maintenance expenses. Other expenses, there were none. Fixed costs, insurance premium came in at $1,831 for a total of $2.43 per mile. Totals for week 52, total expenses were $2,440 at $3.24 per mile. Total revenue was $1,928 at $2.56 per mile. That brought our net settlement to negative $511 at negative 68 cents per mile. Okay, yeah, week 52, also not typical at all. Ran 753 miles, $1,900. I'm just staying in the local Las Vegas, Los Angeles area for the time being, so kind of restricted where I was willing to run at this point, and that kind of resulted in a weird week. I also did take a couple of days off, or a few days off this week as well, so that's why everything is so short. Fuel expense was a little high because the mileage was high. I'm guessing I started the week empty and ended the week full, which is why the cost per mile there is very high, so there's that. No maintenance expenses. Generally, I don't have maintenance expenses every week, but when I do have a maintenance expense, it tends to be kind of expensive because that's how maintenance works. So there's that. Other expenses, again, nothing came in. That's not typical. Usually, I don't go 2 weeks without a single other expense. Usually there's something in here, but for the last 2 weeks, for whatever reason, nothing fell into the other expenses. So there's that. And then looking at the fixed costs, yeah, $1,800 for my insurance premium. That came in. Just one note, I got a new insurance plan at the beginning of the year, so that insurance premium actually went down a little bit. It was previously $2,000 per month in my first year of active authority, but it went down a little bit, so that's why that premium is a little bit lower. Okay, and then looking at overalls, yeah, not typical at all. 753 miles. $2,400 of expenses is high, and then the revenue is low for a week where I lost a little bit of money. It does happen, especially when you take time off. So that's week 52. That is the final week of running my own authority. So there's that. Now what we're going to do is going to go ahead and we're going to move into the overalls. All right, so just a couple of notes on the overalls. I'm just going to go through all the numbers. I'm just going to blast through all of them, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about each one, and then we're going to go into kind of the mistakes I made and what went wrong this year, and then that's what we're going to do. So let's go ahead. I'm going to just plow through all of the numbers right now, and then we're going to talk about them here in a few minutes. So let's do it. All right, totals after running my authority for 1 year. We drove a total of 108,000 miles. Total expenses were $129,000 at $1.19 per mile, and that is my cost per mile. Total revenue was $207,000 at $1.91 per mile, and that brought our total profit loss to $77,000 at 71 cents per mile, and all of these loads were dry van. Averages and other information. Average weekly paycheck was $1,400. Average weekly miles was 2,000 miles. Total fuel cost was $48,000 at 45 cents per mile, and we used a total of 13,000 gallons and paid an average of $3.53 per gallon. Total maintenance costs were $30,000 at 28 cents per mile. Total revenue was $207,000 at $3,900 per week. Total deadhead was 10,000 miles at 9% of total mileage. We were employed 365 days or 52 weeks. Take 64 days off, 301 days on duty, 151 total loads. Average load length was 719 miles. And if we had a theoretical $500 per week truck payment, we would have made $51,000 at 47 cents per mile. Okay, yeah, so there were my numbers for the last 52 weeks. We covered week 22 as an example of a typical week, and then went over week 51 and 52, which were not typical, but they were the final weeks. Then we went over my overalls, both expenses, revenue, price per gallon, deadhead, everything that I kept track of for an entire 52-week period. So those are all the numbers. So now let's go ahead and just talk about this, and let's talk about what went wrong here. Okay, so first off, why am I saying things went wrong here? Maybe you're new to trucking and you don't, this isn't making any sense to you. So 71 cents per mile was the final number of cash flow I took in while running my own authority with a paid off truck. And that is awful. Now, some of you are probably understand that that number is trash. I would beg to differ a little bit, though. I would say that number is not trash. That's a dumpster fire. Trash is an upgrade. I wish these numbers were trash. This is a complete dumpster fire. Yeah, the dumpster is on fire, and it is spewing out toxic fumes next to a kindergarten school. That's what these numbers are. Okay, I wish I could say these numbers were trash. I don't think that's accurate anymore. This is a dumpster fire is what it is. Yeah, I am in no way bragging about these numbers. When I started this channel, I said I'm just going to show all my numbers, good, bad, ugly, complete trash, and now we have to add another category that's just a dumpster fire. This is awful, okay? 71 cents per mile, running your own authority, is just laughable. And I don't even know what to say. This went very, very poorly. And if you even go just kind of line by line everything, we'll just kind of go through some of these numbers here, the ones that stand out the most. 28 cents per mile for maintenance. That hurt a lot. So I bought a trailer, dry van trailer, and it gave me a ton of problems. I think of this $30,000 here of maintenance expense and 28 cents per mile, I think about half of it were the trailer, roughly, maybe a little less, but roughly half of my maintenance expenses were the trailer. I should have kept track of this, but I didn't, so kind of note to self, and if you're watching this, you should keep track of what is a trailer maintenance expense and a truck maintenance expense. I didn't do it, and I wasn't going to go back and review every single receipt from trailer, sorry about the noise, from trailer and then, trucking, what was the truck expense. So I didn't do that, but I know around half of this was a trailer maintenance expense. So that hurt a lot. Some of the other stuff here, booking loads for $1.91 per mile after deadhead, also very bad. That's not good at all. So that hurt a lot. And then, of course, if you were to minus out a truck payment, which I don't have, it would have come out to 47 cents per mile with a theoretical $500 per week truck payment. And that's a joke. That's just a joke. That's not even company driver pay. This is less than company driver pay. 100% I would have been better as a company driver this year. That's how bad this is. Company driver, I could have pulled 70 or 80 cents as a company driver with no responsibilities whatsoever. So there's that. So this is awful. dumpster fire, less than company driver pay. That's how this first year went. So let's talk about what went wrong here. Okay, so let's first talk about what mistakes I made when I got my own authority. And we'll go from kind of small to medium to kind of strategic mistakes I made when I grabbed my own authority. All right, so let's talk the small mistakes I made, sort of the learning curve mistakes I made that I think everybody is susceptible to. And, if you activate your own authority, I think you'll make similar mistakes as this. But these are pretty forgivable because I think, it's just a learning curve here. But some of the small mistakes I made when I first activated my authority, I only had access to 2 brokers, basically. And you will too if you get a new authority. TQL and CH Robinson. Those are pretty much the only 2 brokers who will work with new authorities. And when I got my authority active, one thing I assumed is that there would not be a lot of loads available to me because I only had access to 2 brokers. So what I started doing at first for around a month or so is I started booking long OTR loads. And the reason why I did this made sense. I thought since I didn't have enough access to enough brokers, there would not be enough loads available to haul short and medium loads. So my thinking was, okay, I'm going to start doing some long loads until I have access to more brokers and therefore access to more loads. Because if I only have to book 1 or 2 loads per week, just cross country, that should help things out. So I did that for about a month before I finally realized that actually TQL and CH Robinson, just those 2 brokers alone, do have enough freight all around the country to keep you busy even on short and medium loads. So it took me, I don't know, about a month to actually fully realize that no, TQL and CH Robinson have plenty of loads available to me. So in the meantime, though, I was hauling these OTR loads, which were not very profitable. So I did that for about a month, and that hurt a little bit, but my thinking made sense. It just took me a while to realize that I was wrong in this issue. So there was an example of like a small, I would call it a learning curve error I made when I first grabbed my authority. Another issue I made, and this is one you're almost certainly going to make, no matter how well you prepare, just negotiating these loads. You're not going to be that good at it when you first start, and neither was I. I'm sure, like the first load I took a load from Los Angeles to Michigan, and I think I booked it for like less than $2 per mile coming out of LA going to the Midwest, which should pay a lot more than that if I recall. So, when you first activate your authority or you do anything new, you're not going to be the best at it. And that was an example, just a small example of, okay, I need to learn how to, negotiate loads a little better. You're going to make that mistake. I made that mistake, but that was another example of just a small learning curve error load that probably everyone will make. Then another example of a kind of a learning curve error I made. So after about 6 months of having my authority active, at that point you get access to a lot more brokers. So I'm like, all right, cool, let's go do that. So what I did is the FMCSA, when you activate your authority, you have like a website where you can update your information. You can update your address, your phone number, your email address, all that stuff. So at about the 6-month mark, I went, okay, when I first activated my authority, I used a personal email address because I didn't have a professional email address set up yet. So that was on the FMCSA website. So when I was registering with these new brokers, I decided that I should probably update my email address to the professional one. Makes sense, right? So that's what I did. I went onto the FMCSA website and I updated my email address from my personal email address to the professional one I was using. Good, no problem, right? Nope. It turns out if you update anything on the FMCSA website, brokers will not allow you to register with them for 2 months after you update something. Now, the reason why they do this is because of fraud. Apparently, shady carriers will update information on the FMCSA website for some reason. I don't know why. And it's an indication of fraud, basically. So when I updated something as simple as my email address, their systems that these carriers use to manage fraud, basically, flagged my account. And when your account is flagged, they won't let you register with them for 2 months for 2 months, basically. So basically, instead of having access to these brokers at the 6-month mark, mine was extended to the 8-month mark. And that led me into a problem, is right about the 8-month mark, that's when peak season started to come about. And I didn't want to register with new brokers who I was unfamiliar with during peak season for fear of getting screwed over myself and not getting paid. So I kind of was limited, in my view, largely to TQL and CH Robinson for most of the year, basically most of the time period, which they don't pay the best. So that hurt a little bit as well. And it's just another example of just like learning curve errors that I made. Um, this is the first time I'm guessing you're hearing that if you update the FMCSA website, you can't register with new brokers. I had no idea that was a thing, but it cost me a little bit there. So that was another example of just like learning curve errors that I think most people will make. Okay, and then moving on to some of the bigger mistakes I made, I would say the most foreseeable mistake I made when I first activated my authority was right there. That right there, dry van. So I've been running dry van on this channel basically the entire time. I have run reefer a little bit, so I do have some experience in that, and I'm sure I could learn flatbed or something like that. It wouldn't have been a problem, but I decided to stick with dry van because I knew it very well, and as I was getting my authority active, and I knew there would be a lot of challenges when getting my authority active, so I didn't want to learn a new equipment set such as flatbed while trying to activate my authority and jump through hoops and figure out how to activate my own authority. So I thought, okay, let's just keep it simple while activating my new authority, and let's go dry van. That was a mistake. Yeah, so dry van might be the easiest, but it does not pay well. One of my viewers generally calls dry van the welfare wagon. And I think that's about accurate. You're on welfare if you're running a dry van. And I think that's basically that's the way it is. Going dry van was a mistake. I should have went flatbed. I should have just went flatbed and struggled my way through it, and that would have helped me out a little bit, okay? But I didn't. So I went dry van. This was a foreseeable error that I made. And if you're going to activate your authority, I would not go dry van because it's not going to pay off. Now, moving on from that, there were some other, I would call them like strategic errors I made when I activated my own authority. So this was kind of hindsight 2020, I suppose, but maybe I could have foreseen it. There are some outfits that use owner-operators with their own authority in a sort of leased on manner. So I'll give you an example and I'll explain what I mean. So Menards, if you guys are familiar with Menards, they are a Midwest construction / Home Depot kind of company. They operate only out of the Midwest. They're in Wisconsin, Ohio, stuff like that. And what they do with their owner operators is they have you get your own authority. So they have you get your own authority. They have you get your own insurance. You have your own ELD. You have your own and everything. And then you are basically leased onto them as an owner operator. Yeah, so they have you haul their trailer, their loads, their freight, their everything. And my understanding is they don't want you hauling with anyone else while you're hauling for them. So you're sort of linked onto them. You're sort of leased onto them in a way, just with your own authority. And hindsight 2020, one strategy I could have employed was leasing on to a company like Menards or somebody who does something the exact same way, and then run Menards for about a year and get my authority active for about a year, and then get access to better brokers, and then have access to lower insurance premiums and have access to everything, right? That would have been a good strategy to carry out for about a year. But I didn't think of that until actually very recently. So that's a strategy I should have employed. And maybe if you're thinking about getting your own authority, that's a strategy you should employ as well. Find a company where you get your own authority active, but then you run their freight. Now, some of you might be mashing in the comments section saying that's a direct shipper. And yes, technically that is a direct shipper outfit there. That's not what I think of, though, when I think of direct shippers. I think of a direct shipper as I'm running my own authority and my own trailers, and I drop them off, and I have an RFP, and then we have our own I negotiate directly with the shipper, and then the rates are they move around a lot. So that's what I think of when I think of direct shipper, because under this pretext, under this understanding of direct shipper, Menards would be a direct shipper, and then technically speaking, running Amazon Relay is also a direct shipper. But I do not consider Amazon Relay to be a direct shipper. So if you're thinking, no, that's a direct shipper model, yeah, it kind of is, but I would kind of beg to differ, to be honest. Okay, and then another mistake I made, in a sense, this wasn't, you might call this a mistake, I would call it a gamble, though. So I used to play a lot of poker, and a bit of a gambler, and I would call this one more of a gamble. So last year I was running Landstar, right, and the market was bad last year. And I thought things would get better at Landstar, but they didn't. But I decided to basically, gambling term, I decided to double down, right? The market was bad last year. Coming into 2025, the market was still bad, but I basically doubled down and I got my own authority. My thinking here was, okay, the market is still bad right now. In 2025, the market, I believe, will improve. So it was a bit of a gamble. Basically, I entered the market thinking things would get better. Is that a mistake? Sort of, right? You can call it a mistake. We're putting it under the category of mistakes, I suppose, but I would say it is more of a gamble. I chose to enter the market in a bad market, and that's in some manners a mistake / gamble. Okay, so those were some of the things I identified that were mistakes I made, right? Learning curve era mistakes, going dry van, not maybe moving to Menards and running for them for a year, or an outfit who does something similar, and then entering the market when the rates were pretty bad. So those are mistakes I made, things I could have done better, and they would have had an effect on these numbers here. So now I wanted to go into things that were simply not in my control. So one thing that was not in my control, and was kind of already mentioned here, new authority, right? So I activated my new authority. Yeah, so it takes about a year to get access to every broker. You do get access to every broker after 6 months, and the more brokers you have access to, the better halt loads you can get. So I already kind of mentioned I screwed up the email thing, which kicked it to 8 months, and then at 8 months I was in peak season, and I didn't want to try to gamble with a broker I did not know very well, right? So that was a bit of a problem. New authority, don't have access to brokers. My insurance premiums were very high, so they're about $2,000 per year to just run the dry van. So that hurt, and yeah, that just hurt. Having a new authority is always a disadvantage. So when you're a new authority, not a lot of people will work with you, and you're going to have a lot of problems. And it did not help the fact that I had a new authority, and I just don't have any control over that, and neither do you. And the other factor that was out of my control, as I already mentioned, the market. So took the gamble, came into the market when rates were pretty much at their lowest, thinking things would get better. I thought they would be better in 2025 when I was working for Landstar. They didn't get better. I doubled down and then kept running with my own authority, and things still did not get better. Now I don't control that. I do control when I I could have waited to get my authority active. So that's why this is sort of a mistake that was in my control, sort of not, in a way, right? But I gambled, and I assumed that the market would get better, and I don't control the market, and the market just did not get any better. So 2025, the rates pretty much stay flatlined. Or 2025, 2024, they were all bad. So yeah, I don't control the market. And that had obviously a significant impact on these numbers. The better the market is, the better I would have done running my own authority. But things never got better, and I simply don't control the market. So those were some of the mistakes I made and some of the problems that I ran into when I started my own authority. Learning curve, dry van, not running for a company that lets you lease on as a guy with his own authority. That would have been a good strategy. Having a new authority, and then just a terrible, terrible market. So those were some of the problems I ran into. Some were preventable. Some I could have softened the blow in some ways. Some of these problems I could have softened the blow. But both played a significant part in these numbers right here. So 2025 was a terrible year, as you can see right here. I am not bragging about these numbers. I'm just showing you them so you have a better idea of what it's like out here running your own authority. I am going to learn from some of these mistakes and make corrections. So for instance, I am correcting the dry van mistake right now. Some of you are saying I should keep this dry van. And the idea of running dry van for another year after this, I'd rather take a loss on the sale of the dry van and move on to something else than stick with this dry van. That is my opinion. That's my perspective at this point. So correcting some of the issues and just learning from this experience. It was not a pleasant experience at all. Moving on, selling the dry van, I am going to try some power only options for a little while and see how that goes. If that does not work, what I will do then is I will go ahead and try to find a reefer or a flatbed or a Conestoga or something else and correct this issue right here. So that is my plan. Sell this dry van, try power only, see how it goes. and then if it doesn't work, the power only options aren't working very well, go get a flatbed or something like that. My authority is also 1 year active at this point, so that should help a lot. So I have access to a lot more loads. For instance, in the case of power only, I have access to basically all the power only options I want, should that work out. So there's that. My insurance premiums have dropped a little bit with an active authority, so that's good. But in the end, there's one issue here that I don't control and I feel had the greatest impact on why this year went so poorly. And there's no drum roll necessary here. It's probably not a secret that the trucking market has been in an absolute rut for the last 2 or 3 years. They're calling it the Great Freight Recession. I have been running right through it, and it's not been pretty. However, as of recently, really the last 2 months, things are showing a significant sign of improvement. So looking at the rates right now in the Midwest and across the country, but specifically the Midwest, it's exploding. So the rates are getting much better across the entire United States, and that is a very good sign. In fact, right now, generally in January and February, the market slows down. It crashes, which is why I take time off. However, taking time off right now is looking a little foolish because right now the market is absolutely exploding. It's doing very, 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 very well, which is not normal, but it is a very good sign. So the reason why I bring this up is, well, if the market improves this year, that's going to help out a ton, right? I got through 2025, 2026 is looking pretty good. And with the compliance crackdown coming on a lot of the illegal operations, that is going to help things out tremendously. So 2026 is looking up. I have 1 year of active authority. Insurance premiums are pretty low. Access to all the brokers. The market is getting very good, and they're cracking down on these illegal operations. So I'm optimistic for 2026. I think it'll be a fairly good year, and I am looking forward to it. Now, at the end of 2026, if these numbers don't get better by a lot, I don't think I will continue. So if I'm looking at 2026, 1 year from now, and I'm still looking at 71 cents per mile, I will almost surely throw in the towel and just crawl back to company and go haul some hazmat or something as a tanker hauler or something like that. So that is the plan. But with all that said, thank you guys for watching this video and staying with me. So these were the numbers of running my own authority for 1 year. I did last year running Landstar as an owner-operator leased on. Before that, I was a company driver, I was a lease operator leased on to Night Transportation. And before that, I was a company driver for Night Transportation. In all 4 positions, I showed basically this exact same sort of scenario where I just compiled all my numbers and showed them to you guys as transparently as I could. So that's good. I hope this channel has been a big help to you, and I hope this adventure and showing these spreadsheets is helpful to you. This is information I did not have when I was coming up in the industry. So I decided to make this channel just to show it as transparently as I possibly could. And I basically accomplished that. I showed company driver, lease operator, owner-operator leased on, and now owner-operator running his own authority. So pretty much accomplished what I set out to do. Gonna keep going, keep running these numbers, just, I kind of like doing it. So yeah, hope this has been helpful to you. I will post another video coming shortly comparing company driver to lease operator to owner-operator leased on to owner-operator running his own authority. So that video will be coming out maybe in the next week or two. So stand by for that. And then moving forward for the next few months, and we'll see how it goes, I'll try some power-only options. Right now, I'm looking at the Amazon blocks as a potential profitable way of running. So I'll try Amazon blocks for a little while, and we'll see how it goes. If it's going well, I'll stick with them. If it's not going well, then I'll probably look into getting a flatbed or a reefer or something and running one of those platforms. So that's the plan for 2026. Try some power only, see how it goes, and if it doesn't work, move on to another platform, not dry van. But that'll pretty much do it for this episode, guys. I sincerely hope this has been helpful to you. It's a lot of work, and, hopefully you enjoy it. So with that said, if you're interested in this spreadsheet or any of the other spreadsheets I've done in the past, they are available in the About section down below. You can find them and open them. Then after you find them and open them, you can just hit File, Download, and then just download them to a Microsoft Excel sheet, and you're free to use them however you please. If you'd like to donate to me directly, there is a Buy Me a Coffee link in the About section down below. Just throw me whatever you feel is appropriate, and I would be very grateful for it. You could throw me a super thanks on YouTube, but YouTube takes like 30 or 40% of the super thanks, whereas Buy Me a Coffee takes like 2 or 3%. So if you're interested in that, that's in the About section down below, and I would really appreciate it. But that will pretty much do it for this episode. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.